If you don't raise the high pass filter up enough, you'll get too much of a pumping sound. If that's what you're going for, that's great, but maybe not on your mix bus, just as a hot tip, because if you do too much pumping on your mix bus, you're going to lose your kick. The next ones are both Sonalksis. I'm not really sure. It's a pretty neutral compressor that I picked up years ago. It doesn't tend to color things very much. What I'm really doing here is I'm just quickly kissing the top of the sound, the treble end, by just touching it. And it usually adds a little bit of sparkle. I have two different ones with different settings, and I usually do back to back. I've stopped using this part of my processing mix bus chain quite as often. Sometimes I'm leaving these off completely. So take it with a grain of salt, take it with what you will. It is part of this track that we're listening to right now. So I'll turn them on one at a time and both. You do hear a little bit of movement in the track too from this. Yeah, it is moving more. It's a nice movement. It's a swimming kind of thing. Okay, now they're both on. This one's just touching the sound most of the time, barely kissing it. Yeah, it's making it a little more dreamy, a little more ethereal, that kind of thing. Anyway, let's keep going. So the next one is, again, Kush Audio. It's the Silica compressor. I was really hot on this when I first got it, and I really liked the way it was shaping the transients. And I think I started this track near when I started using this compressor. So you know how when you get something new, you use it in a lot of places? Well, this is one of those cases. And I don't really use this as much on the mix bus anymore, but you can still get an impression of what it might be able to do. Everything just gets a bit tighter. Feels a little less soupy in the right ways. All right? It's definitely adding a little bit of harmonics to the sound as well. Oh, and my software is getting a little angry. So what's this? This is Tremolator. We've all heard of Tremolator. This is a little bit of a cheat for me. I've used it before to get punch if I'm making a track that's on the grid. Really all I'm doing is I'm just emphasizing the leading edge of the 16th notes of the track just to make it sound a little punchier. And again, this is something I don't do as much. The more I go on, I'm not needing this because I can get the punch that I want. But this was just sort of a little cheat I came up with to make tracks even punchier. And it generates a little space. It makes it feel a little more rhythmic and sucks away. It's just sucking away everything in between the hits of the 16th notes, just a little bit. All right. Wait till the percussion kicks in. See, that changes markedly everything. It keeps the punch, but it loses some of the bloat. And nobody really likes bloat. So the next one's the Clariphonic. This is, again, something I don't use very often these days because I tend to balance my mixes a bit better, but Clariphonic really adds high end. It's really for mids and highs, and it's kind of a hologram machine. It just brings things forward. And if your mix is dull in general, it can be very helpful. I think what I'll do here is I'll turn the bands on one at a time, if I can remember how to do so. All right, so I've just got the bands off, and I'm going to go down and to the left so that it's the same setting as it was. So it will be doing nothing right now because the bands are out. All right. These are generally my favorite settings, the diffuse and the sheen. Okay, here's diffuse. Ooh, yeah. See, that came to life. Let's do a full bypass.
What this man didn't.
Yeah, okay, so it takes a little bit of the blanket off the sound. That's a theme that's coming as we go here, like different sounds are taking a bit of a blanket off. And in that theme, here we have another EQ, and most of the rest is EQs and compressors. This one has its own sound. It's based on a tube-based EQ that's originally designed by a company called A Designs, which is a small company in California, but this is a modeled version that's also related to Kush Audio, so I managed to get access to these plugins as well, and this is a lovely sound, an all tubey kind of sound. So let's see what that does.
What this man didn't know was that the operator...
Right now I'm cutting in the low mids, I'm boosting a little at 800, and I'm boosting at 5K, which often can sound harsh if it goes too far. Let's see what we get though.
An O-ring on an excavator boom.
We're gonna have to let this one build a little bit.
Oil temperature down.
I'll turn it off again. It clears everything up for sure. I'll turn it off one last time. Cool. So now I'm really starting to feel the track. As we come down the list, I could almost accept it at this stage. Some of these other things are just kind of gravy. This is a lot of processing already for the Mixbus, but it's a great one to show because it kind of shows like a worst case scenario where I'm doing more than I would on any other track. But again, I'm going to emphasize, don't be shy at applying things on the Mixbus. That is the cleanest place you can apply them because it's applying to your whole mix across the board. So very little distortion comes out of that, and it's much better than attacking an individual track, unless the individual track, of course, is the problem and not the entire mix, in which case you want to do that. Let's try Novatron here. It has a very special type of movement that I really like, and I've only more recently started really enjoying it on the mix setting, on the Mixbus. The attack is somewhere between 2 milliseconds and 10, probably below 5 or maybe around 5. The release is just slow enough. I like to have it just slow enough that you can hear it, you know, kind of sucking up a little bit. And I set the high pass filter to taste, depending on what the track seems to need in rhythmic music, because it's going to suck the kick in too. So maybe don't apply it here if you're looking for heavy pumping, but this will still do some movement and pumping that you might enjoy.
What this man didn't know was that the operator had left the lift lever in the raised position.
Let's actually skip ahead. So it's on right now. There's movement. Oh yeah, it definitely adds some harmonics too and some sparkle. One thing definitely please be observant to is that I'm kissing everything on the Mixbus, okay? I'm not slamming any of these plugins. Generally one plugin, one modeling plugin that is supposed to have harmonics, if you slam it, oftentimes it's going to eat up your headroom, it's going to eat up your transients, it's going to eat up the punchiness of your sound. You don't really want that. You want to just keep enhancing and kissing. You want to shave, and you don't want to maul it. You want to shave at the barbers. You don't want to be decapitated. Let's listen to Vulf Compressor. Vulf Compressor is doing a sidechain off the kick, so it is creating a, you know, sort of sidechainy sound, but here you see conveniently 71% is, and the other percentage is coming from the regular mix. So it's still reacting a bit to the regular mix. This has a little bit of warbly wow and flutter lo-fi type stuff. It's adding a bit of harmonics as well. It has its own flavor. I don't always use this on the Mixbus. It's a pretty heavy-handed sound. unless it works perfectly, in which case I will use it. So in this case, it must have worked perfectly, and we're going to find out. In the case of this one, in retrospect, even though the song is already complete and I am definitely done with it, I don't know that it's really adding very much. I think that the volume drops very slightly, and you have to watch for that when you're A-Bing. You notice most of my plugins that I showed you, the volume didn't change. If I'm able to level out the volume before and after, I really painstakingly do this near the end of the process or even in the middle, as I'm trying to work with something, because I really want to know if I'm making something better. And if you have a slight volume change, you can't really tell very well anymore if you're making something better. If the volume slightly drops or slightly goes up, you're going to have a perceived change in that. And you probably already know that, but it's definitely worth reiterating. So in this case, the volume might drop just slightly, and maybe that's why I'm not seeing the benefit of it as much as I did probably when I added it in the first place. But I could honestly take or leave what I'm hearing from this one, but I'll of course leave it on so that we end up in the final mix. This is Blyss, and Blyss is Kush audio as well. Again, it's just fantastic. Like, this is more or less, I think, meant for mix buses. It has a little sort of limiter that I have usually almost always on the slow setting, and it's just taking half a dB, and it's adding a little more punch and movement. So I pretty much always have that on, just hitting half a dB on the mix bus, because more I can really hear it. I'll use this different on every mix. Right now I clearly have a high pass filter, which is going to tighten things up significantly at 40, because I think the high pass filter on Blyss is a little bit aggressive. In probably a good way. And then I'm boosting at 80, so it's kind of like the boost and cut in different spots, kind of phenomenon. And thank you, iTunes. I'm cutting a little bit at 200. It's a little bit muddy there, I guess. 5K more boost. The Hammer was also doing that a few plugins ago. And also boost at 8K. I pretty much always boost 8K on this. I'm not really a huge fan of super high crispiness in the track, so I almost never boost anything. I'd say the highest I might go, even with but it would have to be like a bell shape. It would not be a shelf, would be about 12K, but it's pretty rare for me, honestly. The compressor's in, there's a bit of this saturation knob. This saturation seems to be a little bit magic on this. It just seems to bring things forward. Hard to tell, again, if it's a volume effect, but most of the time I'm not doing that. I'm not adding the saturation, but I've definitely added a bit to this track. So let's check out what this does. Here's where quite a bit of the brightness of the track comes from, actually, although it has been cumulative across a lot of effects. So on that one, as it turns out, I definitely don't need the makeup gain that I seem to have on this plugin, because it did get quite a bit louder. It actually would be really hard to compare. In this case, I definitely know what I have done with this ReaEQ. I can see, based on the shape, is I'm basically coming in and doing like a pre-mastering kind of thing. Like I must have gone out of the studio, listened to the track, and this is sort of like a fudge factor EQ where I'm just shifting the sound a little bit towards where it seems to need to be when I leave the studio. In my space, I tend to have always mixed things a little warm and a little dull. I've tried different things to counter that. I do have a monitor effect boosting around 100 so that things are overly warm and I don't make them warm, and that obviously helps a great deal. It helps me make sure that when stuff leaves the studio, it doesn't sound like there are huge packing blankets covering speakers in other environments. But ultimately, I still need to do a bit of mastering. And this track, actually, just it's worth mentioning, after this mix, it went into a file that was mastering all the tracks to match them for my Aquamarine album that I released recently. As a result of that, it was shifted a little more to blend with the other tracks, and so you will not be hearing the final version of that. So let's hear the mastering touch-up EQ.
3 points of contact. 2 feet and 1 hand unencumbered.
Again, just getting brighter again.
In fact, taking shortcuts is often a quick road to trouble.
And that's pretty much all that there is. I want to talk a little bit about StandardCLIP because I love this for electronic music. But just before I do that, I just kind of want to remind everyone that I really appreciate the likes and the views, and I like making stuff. I like sharing knowledge. I like doing all the things I get to do on YouTube. Quite a privilege. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, that would be awesome. If you want to hit the bell and get all notifications for all my new videos, that would be even more awesome. So thanks again for watching. And I'm going to talk to you now about StandardCLIP. StandardCLIP was me trying out a clipper instead of basically like a mastering volume leveler. And for the most part, this works exceptionally well. I haven't found anything I like better for electronic style music with a lot of percussion. It works very well for that because I don't really want to rail my tracks up against the digital ceiling. Like, I do leave a little breathing room. I try to make them competitive with other great artistic tracks that I use as references. But it does only work really well for me on the hard clip setting, which it's on right now. The oversampling will kill your CPU, but it stops any ringing due to the hard clipping that you would normally hear in the audio. So you can crank up this oversampling when you go to mix down, and it'll take longer to mix down, but it'll just create something even crisper. But of course, I can't even run it at this setting without it just bogging the computer down. So basically for percussive music, it's really excellent. You just boost the level going in, you set the clip level a little below digital 0 so that there's room for overs, digital overs, and you can get level out of this, but the punch doesn't go anywhere. And I find with a lot of mastering level ups, or whatever you want to call them, mastering limiters, let's call them, there is something that is lost. So some punch is lost, and it could be just my use of it. I'm not a mastering engineer. I just play one on TV. This plugin still works pretty well for gentler music, but sometimes I need to get something like the Vox & Go Elephant in there, something that takes away some of the peaks basically and smooths it out a little bit, because if this thing is clipping the body of a sound instead of just the transients, it doesn't work so well. It just turns into a crackly mess. But I do love it. I do recommend demoing it and seeing if it works for you for mastering, and I will not apply it on this session. So that's really all I have for you. I'm going to play the track with some final thoughts, and I will turn on and off the whole master bus again and again.
Complain that the scraper is shifting too slow and the controls are sluggish.
So again, Mixbus really important. Don't underestimate it. Use tools on it. There are never too many tools on a bus or on a track if you need them. And in this case, this helps me keep things tight. Sorry about the clicks and pops when I switch the settings. My computer is doing the best it can. Thanks so much again for watching today. Always appreciate it. Have an awesome life.